Now we're entering a small village area of Zotiadejo, famous for its extraordinary and impeccable Amegan voodoo ritual. In this ritual, the whole village is drumming and singing and contacting the gods. And some of the villagers will get the spirits inside them. They go into trance and just completely blast all over. It's a very powerful experience to testify all this. After dancing with me, the guy got a spirit inside himself as well. I must say all this thing is a very, very strange and powerful feeling inside. This gentleman here is now bitten by the Amegan voodoo. So the fellow grabbed a bottle and broke some glass inside his fist to get some blood out. And the other guys was just taking it away for safety reasons. But all these kinds of things can happen when you are in a powerful trance. There you can see a deity, another god, and this guy is beating his head against the wall. But the spirit is so strong that he doesn't feel anything. Godforsaken tourist trap, but for real, this is Africa voodoo. It's totally unpredictable, sometimes a bit scary as well. You never can tell what's happening. Anybody, anytime can get a spirit inside them. Maybe even us. Outside the central drumming area, there's another deity here. A little kid just bit a living puppy's throat, killed it with his bare teeth, and now it's sacrificed here on this deity, the small puppy. It's very strong, it's moonshine, palm wine.
This day is specially auspicious for the worship of the goddess Durga, and the whole village comes together in a celebration that will last through the night. The evening begins with a dance of worship, with the devout carrying flaming pots. Protected by their belief in Mother Durga, they perform deeds they otherwise would not believe possible. The fortunate will be possessed by the spirit of the goddess. The clay lamps are replaced by the more deadly sword, the weapon that Goddess Durga uses in her battle to rid the world of evil.
He will try to evoke the local spirits here. His hope is that they will help resolve a problem affecting a sick man. The ritual follows a standard scenario. The shaman gradually enters a trance. The tamborine's rhythmic tempo quickens, and the shaman's movements become ever more abrupt and jerky. The tambourine falls silent. The shaman writhes with convulsions. This means that a spirit has entered him. As a rule, the shaman knows which spirit he is invoking and what he can expect of it. This time, however, something has gone wrong. Blood begins trickling from the shaman's mouth. His sagging legs hardly support him as he limps around the bonfire, producing incomprehensible sounds or roaring like a beast. Somebody has fainted. Everybody becomes jittery. No contact with the spirit is likely to take place today. The tension dies down a few minutes later when a spirit in the shape of a shaman accepts a gift and begins gesturing as he squats near the sick man. Soon he roars again and vanishes in the dark. Soon Tiergen is found lying face down in the snow. He has absolutely no idea of what happened to him only a short while ago. Even so, the ritual has to go on. A spade with a handful of red-hot coals taken from the bonfire is moved close to the shaman's face. As the sick man looks on, the shaman grabs the coals, shoves them into his mouth and chews them and spits them out into the snow. How many ailments have been defeated in today's ritual depends on the number of coals chewed by the shaman.
In contemporary Korea, many shamans worship Changun, the spirits of warrior generals.
나라 장군님도 있고요. 또는 그 중국에서 오시는 관훈장이라든지 이런 장군님도 오십니다. 또는 일본 장군님도 모시세요. 저희가 징기스칸도 모시고요. 그러니까
In her home, Shaman Sokyong-uk keeps a special shrine dedicated to General Chae-yong, who died as a national hero in 1388. His image on the wall overlooks the many costumes and traditional weapons the shaman uses to entertain her general's spirit during a ritual of possession called kut. When shamans invite the spirits of Changun to possess them, they exhibit behaviors very different from those of their daily lives, including some traditionally considered masculine.
저는 술, 담배를 못 해요. 술도 못 먹고 담배도 못 펴요. 그런데 이 장군복 입고 굿할 때 장군복 입고 장군신이 들어오면은 술 먹고 담배 피고 있는데 괜찮아요. 안 아파요.
왜요? 어떻게?
글쎄 모르겠어요.
The best known act of Korean shamanism is climbing onto the chaktu, sharp knives for chopping fodder.
작두 타면 기분 좋아요. 작두 타면 기분 좋고 높이 이렇게 놓고 위에 올라가서 타잖아요. 옛날에는 이 작두를 타려면은 작두 신령, 작두 장군이 이렇게 모셔야만이 들어와야만이 작두를 탄다고 나는 생각을 하거든요. 근데 지금 저는 이 시를 받고 나서 1년 있다가 기도 드려서 1년 있다가 점 볼 때 이 작두를 가지고 어떤 분이 갑옷을 입고 이렇게 들어오시더라고요. 작두 2개를 가지고. 그래서 법당 위에다 갖다 놓는 거를 내가 하고 그때부터 작두를 타기 시작했는데요. 작두를 타면은 기분 좋고 너무너무 좋고.
작두 위에 올라가는 건 장군님의 최고의 위용이라든지 위상을 자랑하시는 거고 과시하시는 거고 또는 인간의 모든 그런 크고 작은 칼끝 같은 이 많은 수가 좋지를 못한 거를 작두로 누르기도 하고 또는 그 운을 받아서 하늘에 알리기도 하고 장군님이 위용이 거기서 나타나서 황해도 곳에서 장군님을 모시고 있는 사람만이 원래는 작두를 타게 돼 있는데 지금은 만신들이 거의 또 장군님들을 많이 모셨기 때문에 작두를 많이 타기도 합니다만은 원래는 황해도 최영 장군님이 주관해서 작두를 타는 거죠. 보통 사람이 생각하는 것처럼 저희들은 그렇게 힘들진 않아요. 굉장히 좋아요. 작두를 타면은.
Brings a certain fascination. The Nei Chung, as the principal state oracle, goes first into trance. He's followed by the Gadong, the oracle who does not yet speak. The Dalai Lama believes it may be because of his physical condition. He contracted tuberculosis when he came to India from Tibet. But once he disappears into trance, whatever possesses him makes a mighty effort to get out a few words. Finally, the Tenma is brought in. While she's not a state oracle, she is a protector of the Buddha Dharma, the vast body of Buddhist thought she's been oath-bound to support for the last 1,200 years. Looking at this face, it dawns on me that whether we try to interpret this experience from a Western psychological perspective, as some dissociated or transpersonal state of human consciousness, or see it like the Tibetans as a window onto a consciousness that is completely non-human, that ultimately we are witnessing the self disappearing within an experience of such depth and subtlety that any explanation for it will necessarily come up short. Although it's perhaps worth noting that the Tibetan explanation engenders respect for the experience, while mainstream psychological science treats it at best as anomalous and at worst as abnormal.
What did you learn?
No particular sort of points to ask them. This year, we will contact with Chinese government, so these should be successful. And then me personally visit different country, so any some serious obstacle there or not, they all say, okay, no problem. Then one occasion, the Nei Chung oracle much sort of moved. He asked me I should live long. So like human being, very much emotion, nearly sort of crying. And then Tenma, similar sort of response at the end, some poems expressing again for my long life, prayer or some kind of request, like that.
Whatever oracles are, for the Dalai Lama they are not special. They are just another input into his decision-making process.
We are human beings. These are oracle. We are more important. We have more responsibility. I usually ask them their suggestion. If something, according to our common sense, this is definite only one choice, then we take decision. But if there are few choice, we feel dilemma, then ask different views, or sort of, different views from different people as well as different oracle. Right. That usually I do. Then finally, usually I do the divination. But these things, you need some meditation. Yeah. In my case, firstly, I remember Buddha, then Brahmasambhava, then Lama Tsongkhapa, then Mahakala,
After a lengthy sequence of meditations that culminates in the Buddhist view of interdependency, the Dalai Lama does a traditional Tibetan divination. In the Mo or Dobal divination, balls of barley dough are wrapped around pieces of paper with choices written on them. They are then rolled around inside a bowl. With the mind in a meditative state that directly perceives the interdependence of all things, the ball that first escapes the rim sometimes becomes
speaker of truth. Otherwise, this the ball, it's just nonsense, silly. But a lot of meditations and the understanding of the reality of the nature. No?
I felt it was like a paper cut sting.
For 20 years, this Brazilian farmer has been performing operations with unsophisticated medical instruments and without anesthetic. He claims that spirits of the dead are working through him.
Com 45 anos.
God gave him this mission, and all the work that is carried out here is carried out by God and the compassionate spirits.
Many say they have experienced miraculous cures, but the evidence for this is anecdotal, not scientific. So if they have, is the key their faith or the ability of the man they call John of God? Overlooking a tropical valley in central Brazil is the village of Abadiânia. It's off the tourist trail, yet hundreds of travelers arrive here every week. Their destination, Casa de Dom Inácio.
There are so many people that come here that the doctors have given a week or 2 weeks to live, and they jump on a plane without even knowing what to expect here.
The Casa is home to a man rumored to cure the sick. He does not charge for his services. João Teixeira de Faria receives visitors like a doctor receiving patients. But he is not a doctor. He had no formal education beyond the age of 10. Yet, he apparently carries out medical operations. He does so in an environment that is far from sterile. His subjects often stand, and he never uses anesthetic. Most of his patients report little or no pain, and there are no documented cases of post-operative infection. His methods confound those trained in Western medicine.
I cannot operate like he does and not have infections. I cannot operate like he does and not have a lot of bleeding, and I cannot operate like he does and not have a great deal of pain. I do not know how he does that.
Dr. Philip Bechtel, a neurosurgeon from Texas, became frustrated by the poor success rate of brain tumor treatment. He began to study alternative forms of healing. This has led him to the Casa de Dom Inácio 11 times.
The really incredible one to me is the eye scraping. You can see the indention on the globe of the pressure of the knife. And I know that those people have not had eye drops put in to anesthetize.
João often treats one part of the body, such as the eye, to cure an entirely different part. Patients undergo the operations willingly, belief and the hope that they may experience a miracle. Roland Knipp has been told by his doctor in Honolulu that he needs open heart surgery to repair a defective heart valve. He hopes João will be able to heal him without the operation. 10-year-old Alexander Seisner came from the Netherlands for treatment of a rare degenerative condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, or DMD. Briton Martin Duffy is paralyzed from the waist down. He's hoping to be able to walk again. Christy First was in a car crash and is also paralyzed. She has made the journey from Florida to Brazil several times. Izzy Salzberg and his wife came to the casa from Chicago. She is suffering from cancer and is desperate for a cure. Though more skeptical than his wife, he wonders if Joam can alleviate his depression. Laura von Wagner, also a cancer patient, will soon head to Brazil from Hawaii, accompanied by her husband Ray. For 2 years, Laura has been battling lymphoma, which causes tumors in her neck.
At first, it was just here, now it's here, now it's down here, now it's down here. It's a very aggressive form of cancer. It grows on a daily level. I mean, it grows daily.
Although the cancer is life-threatening, Laura has rejected chemotherapy.
Chemotherapy is just poison. They give you chemotherapy, and they see who dies first, the cancer or you. Even if I get chemotherapy, they only expect the remission to last maybe 3 to 4 years. And then they want you to go through it again.
Laura's lymphoma went into remission briefly, but now her cancer has returned.
I don't want to struggle anymore. I don't want to fight anymore. I need to either let go of it, or I don't know that I'll make it.
Laura von Wagner has lymphoma. She and her husband Ray are traveling to central Brazil to visit a healer. They hope João Teixeira de Faria, also known as John of God, will be able to cure her. Laura's doctor, Galen Yee, is not so optimistic. He questions her choice of treatment.
She is going to be spending precious time traveling all the way to Brazil and being away from possibly Western types of medicines that may possibly give her a better chance of treatment. And she may be using this time when she could be here to getting proper treatment.
Dr. Yee's views about the sorts of treatments offered by João are common amongst the Western medical establishment. Some go so far as to say the activities at the Casa de Dom Inácio are fakery. One thing is certain: if people are cured, how this is done has not been explained scientifically. That doesn't matter to Laura. She has put her faith in John of God's hands.
I feel calm. I feel that no matter what happens, I'll be in a better place at the end. So I'm happy. I just feel that being in that energy is going to be so wonderful.
Once at the Casa, that faith will be tested to its limits. Many people come to João expecting an overnight cure for disease, an instant healing of injury. But what they find is that such miracles sometimes need a bit of help and hard work. Christy First has spent a great deal of time at the Casa. She made her first visit a year and a half after breaking her back in a car crash.
It was raining really hard, and really a car cut me off, and the rest is history. You know, the doctors told me and my family that, you know, I would never have a chance of walking, and really there was no reason to even do therapy. They said just get on with your life and accept it.
Rather than giving up hope, Christy looked for an alternative solution, and her quest brought her to João. If his actions do lead to healing, the question is how. Brazil is at the center of a belief system called Spiritism. Over 2 million Brazilians subscribe to this philosophy, which usually goes hand in hand with a deep faith in Christianity. It asserts that spirits of the dead operate through certain live individuals. In João's case, the spirits are those of medical doctors who were great healers in their day. João goes into a trance and the spirits operate through him. Dr. Norman Don, a neuroscientist from the University of Illinois at Chicago, has studied trance healers, among them John of God. Such healers claim to have no recollection of what they do during a healing procedure.
In the moment that he prepares to receive the helping spirits that God has honored him with, then he says a prayer. And he receives the spirit, the helping spirit, and then he goes to sleep. He sleeps. He has no memory.
Joam claims he began communicating with spirits as a young man, when he fell unconscious and channeled King Solomon. Since then, he says he has channeled more than 30 spirits, or entities as he refers to them. These range from St. Francis of Assisi to Osvaldo Cruz, a celebrated Brazilian doctor who died nearly 100 years ago. Joam believes that these entities have made it possible for him to carry out thousands of procedures. Some are completely non-invasive. Others involve some form of actual operation. Lynn Debenham has first-hand experience of the latter. 6 years ago, Joam removed a large benign tumour from her back.
All I was doing at the time, because he came and he closed my eyes, and all I was doing was just with my eyes closed going, please God, don't let him put scissors up my nose, please God, don't let him put scissors up my nose, because I knew he did those.
Lynn had already witnessed Joam inserting a 10-centimetre long surgical instrument into a patient's nose, a procedure he uses to treat a variety of ailments.
João, now incorporated obviously, came and took me by the shoulders and turned me around to face the wall. So it was a big sigh of relief because I thought, good, no scissors up the nose. And he led me to the triangle, and I stood for maybe about 10 minutes of the operation, and then they brought a stool in and I sat on that for the rest of it. And he removed the whole thing.
Professor Gary Schwartz, a neuroscientist at the University of Arizona, is a specialist in the afterlife. He has received government funding for his research. Schwartz reviewed the tape of Lynn's operation.
I mean, one of the things that's very clear about this is an intensive amount of cutting with relatively little bleeding. And there's a lot of pulling and tearing of tissue, and yet we do not see this woman showing any manifestation of flinching. We're not hearing any cries.
The initial incision, I felt it was like a paper cut sting, but after that, I could feel everything he was doing, but no pain.
Under normal circumstances, people would be screaming in pain at this point. They would be flinching, and of course the side effect of all this is, of course, you'd see a lot more bleeding.
When I felt that first incision, I gritted my teeth and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to feel this, and it was like, I really thought I was going to feel some pain. But after that initial incision, I could feel everything he did, everything, with putting his finger in and poking around and pulling and twisting.
Any normal individual who didn't want to have physical surgery and then to endure this would also be, you could say, not properly prepared.
And, the whole thing, it came out in 3 pieces, 2 small pieces and then 1 very big piece. And I could feel everything. And it was also like there was a part of me that I could see it, as if I was standing behind me, watching it. But I was fully aware of everything in my body as well, and I wasn't in a trance, I wasn't knocked out, nothing. I was very, very conscious.
It defies any kind of normal expectation.
John of God may be best known for his invasive procedures without the use of anaesthetic. But there is another sort of operation that many of his patients say is just as effective. It happens without physical contact and is known as invisible surgery. In preparation, he takes part in a session that looks like group meditation, But those who have experienced it speak of something more profound.
Just being in there, my heart just was blown wide open, and the energy was fantastic.
These people are in what is called the current room. What is the current? Believers say it is conscious energy, energy that is focused on healing. The concept makes sense to Dr. Amit Goswami, a professor of physics at the University of Oregon. He is one of several renegade scientists who are exploring spiritual answers to scientific puzzles, and vice versa. Dr. Goswami believes that quantum physics may explain how spirits could interact with the material world, how consciousness might live on after the body dies, and how that disembodied consciousness could be channeled.
In the quantum model, things are not things. What I mean is that the objects that we portray in our world are not determined things. Instead, there are possibilities of consciousness to choose.
We have done research, for example, in our laboratory where we've been able to show that people who practice Reiki can affect the cellular growth of E. coli bacteria in a test tube. So we're actually showing that here's a case of conscious intention using a Japanese form of healing is actually affecting cellular function in a controlled context.
Edwin and Tatiana Seisner do not accept that their son, 10-year-old Alexander, will die from Duchenne muscular dystrophy before the age of 30. They have been here for 2 years, and their faith in John of God is unshaken.
We all have the feeling that Alexander will be cured, and that we have to have faith, and that we have to have patience. As Tatiana said, it's, as also Dom Ignacio told me, when I asked, I said, Father, how long is this going to take? And he said to me, he took my hand, and he said to me, son, you have to realize that curing your son, it's like reborning him. Everything we have to rebuild, this takes time. And I was so overwhelmed by this sentence that I couldn't ask him anymore how much time.
Faith and persistence, two qualities shared by many who come here. Even though the invisible surgery appears to have had no effect on his defective heart valve, Roland Knipp continues to believe that Zhuam can heal him.
I became involved in what is now known as channeling in the late 1960s. It was a spontaneous experience. We had been trying astral travel and a group of other techniques to let our spirits leave our bodies, to develop clairvoyant abilities, and so on. And when I say we, I mean a small group of us that had polarized together around an occult worldview. By trying these different techniques, I inadvertently opened myself up, and various entities began speaking through me. Initially speaking in my head, and then eventually taking over to such a degree they were using my vocal cords and speaking through me to our friends.
Mike could literally be talking to you as I'm talking to you now, and instantly, in a moment, change and be taken over, and someone else would be talking. And his voice would literally stop being Mike and all of a sudden be somebody else.
Initially, it seemed to take them quite a bit of effort to take control of me. And it was more or less a voluntary thing. But as time passed, I realized that it was getting much, much easier for them to slip in and out. We used to call it someone popping in. We'd say, oh, so-and-so just popped in when you were gone. And they would appear sometimes for hours, sometimes for just a few minutes. And then we realized eventually that they were able to go in and out as they pleased by the end of things. And we asked one of the entities, someone asked on my behalf and said, why is it that you can get in and out of Mike's personality so readily? And they said something to the effect of, all human beings have a door that will keep other spirit beings out. And in most people's cases, the door is locked and barred and stapled shut and roped shut and sealed. And they said in my case, it was virtually hanging off the hinges.
They claimed to be distinctive entities. In other words, if they had a name, they would say their name if they had a purpose or a distinctive, they would tell you that in many cases. But the range would range from very what we call low-level life forms that really didn't seem to have any purpose except to be pranksters, that sort of thing, on up to through the sort of human range, right on up to the what you call ascended masters, the wise, benevolent, powerful type entities, and the antithesis of that, the evil, powerful, intelligent entities as well.
They claim to be ascended masters, highly advanced spirit beings, even on other planets, people on various astral planes who had reincarnated and then gone on to perfection, Tibetan Buddhists, people from the past. I mean, there was an entire realm of things that they called themselves. However, the common thread was they were all spiritually pure and were contacting our little group specifically to help us evolve spiritually.
Warder often witnessed strange occurrences. He feared the darker controlling entities, one of whom regularly threatened him with knives. Still, he was fascinated by the spirit's powers.
One evening when I was over at Mike's place, we were just sitting talking when all of a sudden one of the entities popped in and became visibly angry with, I think, primarily myself, and began ranting and raving. I can't remember the exact words he was saying, but he got up and sort of stormed off into the kitchen. My habit being to always follow Mike into the kitchen or anywhere where there were knives present. And so I just followed, but I was very concerned with what was going on. As I got to the doorway of the kitchen, Mike, quote, Mike was standing and had picked up 2 Coke bottles off the counter, 2 26-ounce Coke bottles, and held them both out in front of him and crushed them simultaneously, one in each hand. Then, unfortunately, Mike, the entity left, and Mike was not able to come back right away. And in that delay time, Mike fell forward into the broken glass, cutting his, I don't know if his hands were cut at that moment or when he actually crushed the bottles, but they were cut fairly badly. He was obviously in shock when he came back. I got him up, moved him to the couch in the living room, and again he was taken over, this time by another entity which seemed much gentler and more benevolent, and held out his hands in a very almost pathetic sort of way and said, "Do the wounds on my hands seem familiar to you?" And now we had an entity who was claiming to be or imitating Christ.
One of the things the entities used to do was they used to test us. It was as though we were being brainwashed. We'd be told to do something very bizarre immediately, or we'd be told to go at midnight to this certain forest that was very, very terrifying to us because there'd been a number of manifestations there. We'd be told to go alone there at midnight and stay there for an hour and then come home. And they were testing our readiness to respond immediately to their commands. And we were not to test them ever, because they always said proof comes to those who do not ask for it, which sounds vaguely biblical, but it isn't. And I recall one time, one of the entities was put to the test. One of the particular people in the group suddenly spoke to it in German. And the entity, without missing a beat, stopped its sentence with the other person, turned and addressed him in flawless German, and then turned back and continued the conversation. Well, none of us knew German. None of us had studied it at any time. But the entity was able to switch in and out of the other language immediately.
While researching mediumship, Western psychologist William James stated, "The refusal of modern enlightenment to treat possession as a hypothesis to be spoken of as even possible, in spite of the massive human experience in its favor, has always seemed to me a curious example of the power of fashion in things scientific." That the demon theory will have its innings again is to my mind absolutely certain. One has to be scientific indeed to be blind and ignorant enough to suspect no such possibility.
Well, they claim to be ascended masters, but in reality they were the exact opposite end of the spiritual scale. There's no question in my mind now that they were demon spirits. If you had asked me then, I would have believed entirely that they were higher beings, a higher spiritual order of beings. I wouldn't have believed in demons. I didn't think they existed. I thought they were an invention of the Christian church. In retrospect now, I can see back with horrible clarity that they were malevolent, created, demonic spirits intent on our destruction. In my own case, I recall that some of the entities we had to deal with were overtly violent, almost psychotic. And the others were pure and altruistic, and all they wanted to do was help us, and they would warn us about things that the nasty entities were doing, and they would give us teaching and methods of developing ourselves and so on. In retrospect, I'd like to say that all the entities were equally evil. It was the clever way it was presented by showing this group as overtly evil that made us more ready to accept these guys as the good guys. In reality, they were all in it together.
In evaluating the situation, the reason they appeared to be good or evil was to create a contrast and also to create further deception. You know, it was obviously that the whole thing was, it was an incredible deception, but it would have had no credibility if it was obvious as a deception.
Obviously, what spirits do is warp people's perception of what reality is about. And I think one of the difficult things is that you are really dealing with people who are being duped, is the best word I could say, and in that handing over of themselves to this power, in that handing over, they're going to see that as good stuff and not see that they are moving towards some very destructive things for themselves and for others.
Biblical writers of both Old and New Testament have much to say about the continuous attempt by Satan and evil spirits or demons to deceive the human race. Moses wrote of Satan's enticement and deception of Eve in the Garden of Eden, "You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God." Ramtha, channeled by J.Z. Knight, has stated, "What is termed God is within your being, and that which is called Christ is within your being. And when you know you are God, you will find joy." Helen Schuckman, who claims to channel Jesus, states in her work entitled A Course in Miracles, "God's name is holy, but no holier than yours. To call upon his name is but to call upon your own. You are the Holy Son of God himself."
Helen Schuckman, who was a psychologist at Columbia University, and kept hearing this voice that said, "This is a Course in Miracles, take it down. This is a Course in Miracles, take it down." She didn't want to take it down. She was an atheist. She didn't believe in this other dimension. And she consulted her fellow psychologists, and they said, "Well, go ahead." And so she took it down, 1,100 pages. A Course in Miracles, which claimed to come from Jesus, but which, in fact, undermined everything Jesus said.
It's the age-old battle between good and evil. The Bible will tell you that the devil will come in many forms. And in a sense, these beings are an aspect of that side of nature, the dark side. And therefore, they don't like mention of Christ. They won't come out usually and say Christ is bad. They will subtly put Christ down. They will say that Christ wasn't really a truly historic figure, that his deeds have been magnified over the years.
All people who are channeling entities, whatever they say they are, Jesus Christ, Buddha, your Aunt Vera, whoever, they're not these pure, altruistic, beautiful beings that they seem to be. If you strip away the covering, you'll find a demon behind every one of these voices, behind every one of the spirits. In fact, one of their most clever ploys is to appear, as the Bible says, even Satan disguises as an angel of light. We're seeing these emissaries of evil that are dressing in the most wonderful packaging, so people are accepting them as genuine. People are seeing them as good and pure, and in reality, even the good ones are demon spirits.
Very clever and subtle manipulation.